millions of Americans, Puerto Rico is a vacation. A quick escape without needing a passport. A stretch of white sand in Culebra, where Playa Flamenco's turquoise water looks almost too perfect to be real. A weekend in Old San Juan, wandering colorful cobblestone streets beneath the shadow of El Morro. A cruise stop. A piña colada. A postcard framed by palm trees and sunlight. But for the people who actually live here, Puerto Rico is something much harder to explain. Because this island is more than paradise. It's pressure, it's beauty, and burden. It's waking up to the sound of coqui frogs and ocean waves. And living with the memory of how quickly those same waters can turn violent. It's an island where the sea gives everything. Food from towns like Boquerón, where fresh fish fills the tables. Tourism that fuels livelihoods from San Juan to Vieques. Beaches that draw the world in. Flamenco, Luquillo, Isla Verde, Playa Sucia. And yet, it's also a place where so much can be taken away overnight. In 2017, Hurricane Maria battered the island, shutting down hotels, damaging roads and deeply affecting the infrastructure. People depend on every day. Then came earthquakes along the southern coast. Then a global pandemic. And behind the beauty, another struggle quietly continues. An economic crisis years in the making. Rising costs. Government cuts. Families balancing island pride with financial uncertainty. For many outsiders, Puerto Rico feels effortless. But for those who call it home, life here requires resilience. Because this is not just a destination. It's a place where history lives in colonial plazas, in Ponce and San Germán. Where mountain towns still grow rich, bold coffee. Where younger generations are creating something new. Opening artisan shops. Building local businesses. Reinventing tourism. And finding opportunity in difficult times. So why do people stay? Why choose to build a life here? On an island that asks so much of the people who love it. Maybe it's the rhythm of salsa drifting through La Placita after dark. Maybe it's family. Maybe it's the rainforests of El Yunque. The hidden caves of Camuy. The glow of Puerto Mosquito on a moonless night. Or maybe it's something harder to describe. A connection to place, to history. to a home that is both fragile and fiercely alive. We're going beyond the resorts, beyond the beaches, beyond the postcard, to discover the real rhythm of life in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico floats between worlds. Geographically, it is unmistakably Caribbean. An island surrounded by warm Atlantic waters and the gentle currents of the Caribbean Sea. A landscape of rainforest mountains, hidden caves, mangrove-lined coasts, and beaches that shift from brilliant white sand to volcanic black. Politically, it is American. US highways, US dollars. American chain stores standing beside centuries-old plazas. Citizens who carry American passports. Who serve in the US military. Who watch mainland politics shape decisions made thousands of miles away. And yet spiritually, Puerto Rico belongs entirely to itself. Because this island cannot be explained by borders alone. It was born from volcanic fire, shaped by trade winds, carved by rivers through emerald mountains, and held together by something far stronger than geography. Identity. You feel it everywhere. In San Juan, where blue cobblestones laid centuries ago still echo beneath hurried footsteps. Where Spanish colonial balconies hang above streets, filled with reggaeton, laughter, and the smell of strong café con leche. In the mountain towns, where coffee farms still cling to steep green hillsides, preserving rhythms older than modern tourism. In Loíza, where African heritage pulses through bomba music and dance. History carried not in museums, but in movement. In Ponce, where elegant plazas and colorful facades tell stories of ambition, pride, and resilience. This is a place where contradictions somehow live comfortably, side by side. Where US dollars buy fresh Mallorcas and coffee at a neighborhood bakery. Where American football plays on television, commentated in Spanish. Where road signs feel familiar to mainland visitors. But the language, the cadence, the humor, and the heartbeat feel unmistakably different. People here carry American passports, but many describe themselves first with a word that feels older. Deeper, Boricua, a word spoken with pride, with memory. It comes from Boriquen, the island's original Taíno name. Long before Puerto Rico became Puerto Rico. Long before colonization. Long before maps changed. Long before borders tried to define what this place would become. And that matters here, because in Puerto Rico, history is never really past. It lives in the Taino symbols, carved into ancient stone. In Spanish forts that still guard San Juan's coastline. In African traditions, woven into music, dance and faith. It lives in the food, in mofongo, pasteles, and recipes passed through generations. It lives in the language, Spanish layered with Taino words and shaped by American influence. It lives in the music, from salsa drifting through city streets to bomba drums echoing across coastal towns. And it lives in something quieter too. In the daily determination to preserve what makes this island home. To protect culture in the face of change. To hold on to identity while navigating political uncertainty. To remain Boricua, in a place forever balancing between worlds. Puerto Rico may belong to America on paper. It may belong to the Caribbean on a map. But in the hearts of the people who live here, it belongs only to itself. Morning begins with coffee. Not optional, not rushed. A ritual. Strong, dark. Sweet enough to wake more than the body, to wake the soul. Before the streets fully stir, before the tropical heat settles in, the day begins with that first familiar cup. At the neighborhood panaderia, the island gathers. Not tourists, not beachgoers, neighbors. People stopping in before work. Grandparents already deep in conversation. Families picking up breakfast wrapped in warm paper. The air smells like fresh bread and roasted coffee. Glass counters filled with pastries still warm from the oven. Soft Mallorcas, dusted generously with powdered sugar. Golden pastries lined neatly beside loaves of fresh bread. Simple food. Comforting food, the kind tied to memory. But people don't come only to eat. They come to talk. Always conversation. Who got sick? Who finally got married? Who just had a baby? Who's leaving for Orlando next month? Who's been away too long? Who's coming back home? On an island where so many families stretch across oceans. Every departure matters. Every return matters even more. Puerto Rico is still a place where neighbors know one another's stories. Not just names, stories. Who lived in that house before? Which family painted their balcony blue? Who lost power during the last storm? Who brought food when someone needed help? The line between private life and public life feels softer here. Front doors stay open, windows stay open, voices spill into the street. A woman waters bright hibiscus flowers outside her doorway. The street spills back into the home. A child pedals barefoot down the sidewalk, weaving around parked cars and puddles left from last night's rain. Laundry shifts gently in the morning breeze. Someone waves from a balcony draped with a Puerto Rican flag. Music hums faintly from somewhere nearby. Nothing dramatic, nothing staged. No postcard perfection. Just ordinary life. Steady, familiar, connected. This is not the Puerto Rico of resorts and infinity pools. This is the Puerto Rico most visitors never stop long enough to see. The quiet rhythm before the beaches fill. The everyday beauty between the guidebook highlights. A morning built on coffee, conversation, and community. And somehow, it feels deeply human. Puerto Rico doesn't just hear music, it breathes it. It spills into the streets before sunrise. It drifts through open windows. It rises from car speakers at stoplights and follows people down narrow sidewalks. Salsa from passing cars. A familiar melody carried through the city air. Impossible to ignore, impossible not to feel. Bomba drums echoing through open courtyards. Deep, steady, alive. Not just rhythm, but remembrance. Plena stories sung in time, voices layered over hand-played percussion. Songs that carry news, history, and generations. Because music here is not simply entertainment, it is memory. A way of preserving what came before. It is resistance, a voice that endured through colonization, hardship and change. And it is joy. Immediate, unapologetic. The kind of joy that invites people to move without asking permission. A child dancing in the street. An elder tapping their hand against a cafe table. Neighbors pausing in conversation when a familiar song begins. In Puerto Rico, music speaks a language older than politics. Older than borders. Older than the debates over identity that try to define this island on paper. Its culture is a living fusion, layered, complex, inseparable. Taino roots, still present in language, symbols, and the island's earliest memory. Spanish colonial history, visible in the plazas, churches, and traditions that remain woven into daily life. African resilience, pulsing through rhythm, dance, and the unmistakable heartbeat of bomba and plena. None of these histories exist separately. They move together. Like instruments in the same song, every beat tells part of that story. Every melody carries something forward, and every celebration feels communal. Not staged, but lived. Color, bright facades and flowing dresses. Movement, bodies swaying instinctively to rhythms they've known their whole lives. Pride, quiet in some moments, joyful in others, always present. Puerto Rico doesn't perform identity. It doesn't need to. It lives it. In every drum beat, every chorus, every spontaneous dance in a public square. On this island, music is not something people listen to. It is something they belong to. Puerto Rico belongs to the United States. But not fully. Residents are American citizens. They carry US passports. They serve in the US military. They use US currency. They follow federal law. Daily life often looks familiar. The same dollar bills, the same postal system, the same flag flying beside Puerto Rico's own. And yet, something remains unfinished. Because Puerto Ricans cannot vote for president. And they have no voting representation in Congress. A contradiction woven quietly into everyday life. Not always visible, always felt. It may not come up in every conversation. It may not define every moment. But it lingers. In classrooms, in elections, in debates at kitchen tables and neighborhood cafes. A political status unresolved for more than a century. Neither fully independent nor fully equal within the Union. Something in between. And for many, that uncertainty is more than legal language. It is emotional. It shapes how people think about identity, about power, about who gets to make decisions for an island with its own history, culture and voice. Statehood? For some, it promises equality, representation, a clearer place within the American system, independence. For others, it means self-determination. The chance to define Puerto Rico entirely on its own terms. Commonwealth? To some, it protects a delicate balance. Connection without complete surrender of identity. Ask 10 people. You may hear 10 different answers. Spoken with conviction, with frustration. Sometimes spoken with exhaustion. Because beneath every opinion lies the same deeper question. Not simply what Puerto Rico should become, but who gets to decide? Who decides Puerto Rico's future? Washington? The island itself? Its people? For generations, that question has remained unanswered. And perhaps that is what makes it so powerful. Puerto Rico knows who it is. But it is still being asked to define what it will be. Living on an island is expensive. Almost everything arrives by ship. Fuel, food, medicine, construction materials. The essentials of daily life, things many people elsewhere rarely think about, must cross the ocean before they ever reach a store shelf. And every mile adds cost. Prices rise, quietly at first. A little more at the grocery store, a little more at the gas station, a little more to repair a home, to build a business, to simply keep moving forward. Wages often don't. For many families, life becomes a constant balancing act, stretching paychecks, delaying plans, making do. Puerto Rico's beauty can feel effortless. Living here often is not. For years, the island has carried the weight of economic crisis. Debt, recession, job scarcity. young professionals searching for opportunities that feel harder and harder to find, small businesses adapting, families learning to live with uncertainty as part of everyday life. And perhaps the deepest wound is not financial. It is migration, not a headline, a heartbreak. Families split across oceans. Children leave, parents stay. Grandparents watch airports become places of repeated goodbye. Florida, New York, Texas. Places where jobs may be easier to find, where opportunity can feel closer, but where home feels farther away. Puerto Rico has a name for this movement, La Guagua Aérea, the Airbus, a steady, familiar current of Boricuas leaving the island. Sometimes for a few years, sometimes forever, and sometimes returning. Because leaving does not always mean letting go. Many carry Puerto Rico with them. In language, in food, in music, in memory. But distance changes families. Birthdays celebrated through screens. Holiday tables missing familiar faces. Parents learning to miss their children in quiet ways. Children learning what it means to love a place they had to leave. Everyone knows someone who left. A cousin, a sibling, a best friend. Everyone misses someone, and yet many stay. Not because it is easy, but because home still means something stronger than convenience. To stay in Puerto Rico is, for many, an act of endurance. An act of loyalty, a belief that despite the rising costs, despite the uncertainty, despite the pull of elsewhere, some things are worth holding on to. You can understand Puerto Rico through its kitchens. Before you hear the stories, before you learn the history, you smell it. The unmistakable scent of sofrito hitting hot oil, garlic, peppers, cilantro. Aroma rising instantly through the house, instantly recognizable. Instantly home. It drifts from the kitchen into every room, calling people closer. A signal that something is being prepared. Something familiar, something shared. Plantains are everywhere, not as a side dish, as a foundation. Tostones crisp and savory. Maduros sweet and caramelized. Mofongo rich and comforting, shaped by practiced hands. Rice and beans beside nearly every table. Pernil, slow-cooked and deeply seasoned. Pasteles, wrapped carefully in banana leaves. Folded, tied, and prepared with patience. Meals that take time. Meals meant for more than one person. And that is what matters most. The recipes are rarely written down. No measuring cups or printed instructions. They are inherited. A pinch here, a little more there, measured by instinct, by memory, by taste. Corrected gently by grandmothers watching from nearby. Noting what's missing before anyone else can. adjusting hands, not just ingredients. Passing down knowledge that lives in repetition. In Puerto Rico, cooking is not simply about feeding people. It is about remembering those who taught you. Remembering the flavors of childhood. Remembering family members who may no longer sit at the table, but still somehow remain present in the food. Because food here is not consumption. It is inheritance, a way of carrying culture forward. One recipe, one kitchen, one generation at a time. Puerto Rico is astonishingly diverse: rainforest, dry forest, limestone cliffs, mangroves, mountain villages, bioluminescent waters. And always the ocean. The island isn't scenery, it's a participant. People organize life around it. Beach tents every weekend. Portable grills. Entire families under one canopy. The sea is playground. Medicine, meditation, and warning. Because beauty here always carries risk. To live in Puerto Rico is to live with hurricanes, not abstractly, personally. Everyone remembers where they were during Maria. The darkness after, the waiting, the silence. The uncertainty, months without power. Entire communities surviving on generators and neighbors. And yet, what many remember most is not destruction. It's solidarity. People sharing food, charging phones for strangers, clearing roads together. Resilience here is not inspirational branding, it's survival. Puerto Rico is modern and fragile, a place of constant contrast. High-speed internet until the power cuts. One moment, video calls and digital work. The next, darkness. Screens go black. Air conditioners fall silent. Wi-Fi disappears. And life pauses briefly. Before people adjust. Because they always adjust. Modern highways stretch across much of the island. Smooth lanes carrying commuters into San Juan. Roads connecting beaches, suburbs, and mountain towns. But those same highways can quickly give way to something else. Narrow roads winding into the hills. Roads barely wide enough for 2 cars. Sharp turns, steep climbs. Places where drivers slow instinctively. Not out of caution, but familiarity. The island moves mostly by automobile. Cars are not luxury here. They are necessity for work, for school, for errands, for family visits that can't wait. Traffic can feel endless. Morning backups, afternoon delays, long lines of brake lights under the Caribbean sun. Patience becomes part of the commute. Public transit exists, but only in limited ways. For many, relying on it is not practical. Movement depends on personal planning, on knowing alternate routes, on leaving earlier than necessary, and beneath it all, infrastructure strains. Under age, under demand, under climate, power systems tested by storms, roads worn by heavy rains, buildings repaired, reinforced, repaired again. Nothing feels entirely permanent. So people prepare, not out of fear, out of habit. Generators tucked beside homes, battery backups charging quietly, flashlights ready, extra bottled water stored away, fuel tanks kept fuller than they need to be. A quiet understanding that comfort can't disappear without warning. Island life teaches flexibility, to expect interruption, to live with uncertainty, to continue anyway. Plans change, power fails, storms come, roads flood, and still, people move forward. Because resilience here is not dramatic, it is practical, routine. Learned over time, Puerto Rico is modern, connected, fast-moving. But beneath that modern surface is a deeper awareness. That stability is never something to take for granted, only something to prepare for. And something to rebuild again and again when necessary.